Thanks for listening to NAPAbroadcasting.com. Napa Valley Radio, for the way we live now.
Thanks for joining us here on Napa Broadcasting. We're going to spend some time talking cannabis in this program today, as I'm joined by Eric Sklar and Stephanie Honig, representing the Napa Valley Cannabis Association. Thanks so much for coming in.
Good to be here, Jeff.
Thanks for having us.
Great to have you here. Eric, first of all, we had talked about this in the past, but for our listeners that don't know, talk a little bit about the organization, about how it came to be, and what its goal is.
Okay, well, first of all, I'll let you know that Stephanie Honig is our president of the Napa Valley Cannabis Association. We founded ourselves last year, early in the year, to advocate for reasonable, sensible regulations to allow cannabis business to operate in Napa the way the voters asked that they be allowed to do under Prop 64.
And do you think that there's been a pushback to Prop 64 in Napa? And if so, talk a little bit about what you've seen that really is evidence of that.
Rather than a pushback, I'd call it an obstacle. The local officials, city council members, and board of supervisors at all levels have just resisted doing their job, which is to take Prop 64, which was a state initiative, and put in place the local ordinance that need to actually make it happen. The result has been terrible in that this experiment of legalizing cannabis has resulted in 60% of cannabis still being purchased on the black market. The whole idea was to legalize it so we could tax it, regulate it, make sure it's safe. So by keeping 60% of it in the black market, since Napa, the city and the county and other cities in the Napa County won't allow us to open our businesses here, is that black market ensures that there's still cannabis out there that is poisoned with pesticides, that the environment's being damaged by those same pesticides, that we're not collecting the taxes, which can be used for youth education and for enforcement against illegal businesses. And so we're asking that the board of supervisors and eventually the other cities as well enact reasonable regulations to allow cannabis businesses to operate here and end the black market.
When you look at, Stephanie, when you look at either one of you, when you look at other states that have legalized recreational use in particular, has there been the same kind of slow rollout? Has there been the same kind of resistance and ultimately acceptance that we're seeing here?
It's taken not as long as it has taken here. And we learn from some of these places, and some of the major concerns about legalizing cannabis. In a poll we just did in December here in Napa County, the major concerns are youth use and driving, and both of those in those states that it's legal have gone down. Mm-hmm. So we're using that as we look at those states as something that we could replicate here.
What has been, Eric, the response from law enforcement here in Napa to all of this?
Generally, the law enforcement folks we met with, the chiefs, have been generally, agnostic. They feel like, this is coming. They just want to make sure that they do it right and that we figure out how to find out if somebody's driving and smoking. Sheriff Robertson has been generally kind of blasé about it until he spoke at a supervisor's meeting where he really said it's dangerous, people are going to get shot. It was very strange and hyperbolic and doesn't make any sense. In general, as Stephanie said, the challenges with cannabis for law enforcement go down when it's legalized. On the issue of youth use, it's interesting. We're not quite sure why youth use goes down in states that legalize it, except for that we think that it's no longer so cool if your parents are doing it, combined with the fact that taxes make it more expensive. And so you're less likely to use it, which is yet another argument for getting it out of the black market.
Mm-hmm. When you look around the Bay Area, talk a little bit about what other cities have done, where you've seen situations similar to what you're talking about in Napa, and where you've seen greater acceptance.
Yeah, in Oakland and San Francisco, there have been lots of dispensaries for a long time, and it's ended the black market there largely. There are a few illegal stores that are getting shut down as we speak by state authorities to make sure that the legal businesses can succeed and not have competition from illegal ones. So there hasn't been a big deal. These shops are nice and clean, and they're good neighbors. And then on the cultivation side, there's a number of counties that have allowed cultivation because that's where the cultivation should occur, out in the rural counties, in the unincorporated areas. Lake County, for instance, where my company, Napa Valley Fume, is growing right now, passed an ordinance last year, and it's going great. There's not been any issues. The Fish and Wildlife and the water boards are happy with the way they can inspect to make sure that we're doing things right. Our products have to be tested, and so that it's super clean when it comes out for consumers. There's no pesticides, no heavy metals, no molds and mildews. So the success in other places has been good, high success rate, and they haven't seen the problems that everybody worries about when they think this is when they haven't seen it yet.
What is the state of the situation right now with respect to cultivation in Napa County?
You can grow personally. up to, I think, 6 plants, or maybe they limited it to fewer. I don't remember exactly. But the state says you can't grow more than 6 plants. Personally, that's all that's allowed in the county is personal growth for personal use. So we're suggesting that they allow cultivation on agricultural land up to 1 acre, just 1 acre, no more than that, and per legal parcel. So it won't be a lot. Cannabis, first of all, is a very dense crop, very high value crop.
And it would probably mostly be planted in the watershed area, and so it would be really limited. It wouldn't, there's a huge misconception that it might take over grapes, and that's not the case at all. I mean, grapes, wine grapes, and the wine business really dominate here in Napa County, and this is it helps diversify, but it's a very small part of what would be here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's a crop that's very dense, like I said. So an acre is a lot. Nobody would plant 100 acres of cannabis. Nobody's going to tear out valuable wine grapes for it. Additionally, you can't actually grow it right next to a vineyard because the overspray from the vineyard spraying would actually get into the cannabis, and those chemicals, while they're allowed on grapes for a lot of reasons, because of the nature of the product, you can't put it on cannabis. Cannabis gets ignited, and it can change chemicals that are on it. So you have to allow almost no contaminants at all. And so it'll be, in areas where the land's not that great for grapes.
Is your association happy with what the city of Napa has done thus far?
I guess we'd call it a mixed bag. They are allowing medical dispensaries, but only in out-of-the-way places where nobody can find them. It doesn't make a lot of sense. They're retail businesses. You should put retail where retail is. We should see one in Bel Air Plaza and one down on Amola, in River Parkway. Those are where we should be having retail stores. So
usually next to a Taco Bell is
perfect. Right? Exactly. I don't know if you recall, Jeff, but my business in D.C. was Burrito Brothers. So I'm all for a burrito place next to a cannabis place.
Talk a little bit about this survey that you've done to try and get a sense of how the public feels about this.
It's been overwhelmingly positive. 64% of Napa County voters won it. Actually, it's closer to 70% if you take half of the unsure people. So we have about a 70% approval rating. It's up 7 points from when people voted for Prop 64. And, we see in general in the country the trend going up. So we expect that if this goes on the ballot in March of 2020, it'll probably be in the mid-70s by then.
You talk about it going on the ballot. What are you thinking about in terms of an initiative at this point?
So we really want to see the supervisors do their job and pass an ordinance at the supervisor level that allows a public process, a series of debates, a working out of the details with everybody, the whole public. So we'd like to see them do that by June of this coming year. But in order to make sure that we get it on the ballot in case they don't by March of 2020, we're going to submit a ballot initiative in the early part of March this year. We'll submit it to John Tudor, and he'll review it, and then we'll start gathering signatures. It'll still give the supervisors time through June to pass an ordinance themselves, which is what we'd really like to see. But if they don't, and if they do pass something by ordinance, then we'll withdraw our ballot initiative. We can do that up until November or so. If they refuse to do it, then we'll put it on the ballot next March. We could also switch to November if we decide that's a better election, but we're likely to put it on the ballot in March of 2020. It's going to allow cultivation of less than an acre on legal parcels in the ag preserve in the ag watershed. It's going to require a 1,000-foot distance from schools, a 500-foot distance from residences, so there's no odor issue. It won't allow tree removal. We will allow greenhouses, not indoor cultivation, but greenhouses, but no lighting at night to keep the dark skies dark. And we will only allow the Napa name to be used on this cannabis if it's grown in the sun in Napa soil.
And Napa brand protection obviously is very important as it is to wine. Yeah.
And talk a little bit about what you've seen with respect to the political resistance from the supervisors at this point.
Yeah, there's 5 supervisors, and I guess I would say Stephanie and I met with 4 of them yesterday, meeting with the 5th supervisor on Friday. Everyone has a different kind of position on it. There's at least 3 supervisors who are generally supportive of the idea if it's done right. There's a couple who are not so convinced yet, but we're hoping that a public process, seeing the fact that the public is even more supportive of cannabis now than before, would be the reason to do it. And here's the thing: if you're sitting in that chair, as you know, I sat in the legislator's chair as a council member in St. Helena. It is so much better for the supervisors to do this than by ballot, because once you do it by ballot, you can't change it again except by ballot. So we'd really like to see them do their job.
No, and the voters, actually, that was one of our questions to voters, if they prefer that supervisors create this or work on this ordinance versus putting it on the ballot, and they do.
What about the other cities? Talk about where what you're seeing there.
So American Canyon has passed an ordinance, but for no retail, just for the kind of the back end stuff, distribution, manufacturing, indoor cultivation. And they only allowed it on Green Island Road, basically, and nobody can find a space there that's available to use. So they're going to have to revisit what they're doing. Napa has just allowed medical dispensaries in out-of-the-way locations. So there's one dispensary, there may be a second one, but they're not in good locations. They're not where people will find them very easily, and not sensible from a traffic perspective. And then the other three Up Valley cities haven't done anything. St. Helena, Calistoga, Yountville have all talked about it a little bit, but really just punted and kicked the can down the road.
Whether the Board of Supervisors does something or not, or whether you do this by initiative, that's not going to impact those cities.
That's right. This is just about the county. But, if we're successful in the county with an initiative, we very well might put an initiative on the ballot in St. Helena or Calistoga to get a dispensary or two there, because we believe that it's greener if people can buy the product nearby. We believe that it's especially for older people who want it for medicine, having to drive to Santa Rosa or Vallejo is really too much. There is delivery. My company delivers to most of Napa now, but some people want to go into a store, have somebody who's an expert talk to them about the product. This isn't like, aspirin, right? This is a complicated medicine. It comes in all kinds of different forms, from flour that you would smoke to edibles that you would eat to tinctures to lotions to beverages. And the quantities of THC in a given product vary, and the different other components in there affect its medical impact. So you want somebody who can talk to me, explain, for my bursitis, for my arthritis, for me personally, for my bad ankle that I injured 25 years ago, what's the best thing for me to take and how should I take it? It's really helpful to have a store that you can go into where there's experts who can help you figure that out.
Do you think public attitudes, Stephanie, have changed since Prop 64? More positive or more
Absolutely. Negative? I think it's more positive every day. Yeah. People are more open to it. There's been a tremendous amount of education in terms of the medical benefits and a lot less resistance. So I think it'll just continue to go in the same direction.
Mm-hmm. Talk a little bit about what you see as the downside of if any, of putting this on the ballot, of having to go the initiative route.
Just spending the time and money and running a campaign, which is really not where we want to spend our time or money.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We'd much rather see the supervisors do this. The downside, I guess, is if we lose, then nothing will happen on this for a long time.
Right.
The supervisors won't be encouraged. But we wouldn't put it on the ballot if we didn't think we have a really good chance of winning. With 68 to 70% of people supporting this, that's a big margin. I mean, that's really big. And
talk a little bit about how this survey was done. Scientific survey, professionally done. How was it done?
Change Research is a company out of Palo Alto, started by a woman who ran for city council and was disgusted by how expensive it is to do a poll for a small council race. So she got together with some techies down there, and they created a method of polling where you do it online, but you get a much bigger sample. So say we ended up with 348 members of our sample. They actually got many more than that. You eliminate people who didn't vote by checking against the actual voter files to see if they actually are honest that they voted. You eliminate people who didn't finish the survey. And then you take what's left and you apply an algorithm to it that creates a random sample that represents the way the voters look in Napa. So it has the same number of women and men that voted last election, the same number of Latinos, Hispanics, and the same age range. And so what they do is they end up with a sample that is truly representative. Amazingly, remember the Andrew Gilliam race for the nomination for governor in Florida, guy who lost for governor, but was a big surprise winner of the nomination for the Democratic Party. They hit his success, or they predicted his winning within 0.1 of the actual results. So it's actually getting now more accurate to poll this way online with this scientific method than calling polls, because kids don't have landlines anymore. They don't have landlines, right? So those kind of traditional polls are becoming more and more inaccurate as these scientific online polls are becoming more accurate. So we think it's a very accurate, it's within 5% margin of error with a 95% confidence ratio. These are real pros at what they do. And so we think they're really good numbers, enough that we're willing to put our money where our mouth is and put it on the ballot if we have to.
Who would you expect would oppose this if you put it on the ballot?
We don't expect any organized large opposition. I'm sure there are people who feel threatened by it or don't like it because of family beliefs. But it's about 30% of the population might be indifferent or not agree with it.
Yeah, we have talked to all the standard stakeholders, and in fact, we presented an ordinance to the Board of Supervisors for their suggested approval. 8 months ago. We ran it by the vintners and the Farm Bureau and the grape growers and the wine growers and Mike Hackett and Jim Wilson, and they all had input into it, and we fixed things that they didn't like.
And the realtors.
And the realtors, right, of course. And so we think that the ballot initiative won't have any opposition from any of those groups. I don't think any of them are going to come out and support it and actually campaign for it. But we don't think any of those key groups that make such a big difference in this valley will oppose it. We could see a wealthy, older, conservative vintner putting some money up to do an ad or something, but we don't think so, especially because there won't be any way for them to organize. There won't be a committee against us. So we think this has a high likelihood, but we're not going to take any chances. We're going to work our butts off to make sure it passes if we put it on the ballot, and we don't want to have to do that. We'd rather the supervisors do it.
Is there any reason to wait until the city of Napa is more up and running in terms of what they've done, so that neighboring communities and the county can see what's happening here as sort of a laboratory?
Some would argue that, but this is different than what they're doing. They're doing dispensaries, and we're talking about cultivation. Napa is an agriculture area. Stephanie talks about often is that Measure C, which was so contentious, one side wanted to protect agriculture. Well, this is agriculture, right? The other side doesn't like the monocrop of the kind of agriculture we have and wants to protect rivers and trees. This does that too. It adds another crop, more diversity, and we're going to ban any removal of trees because we don't need big areas. We don't need to remove trees. There's no reason to, and we'll do the full setbacks that anybody wants from rivers and creeks, which is a good idea in general, in my view. So, I think that it's hard to find a good argument for not allowing cultivation in an agricultural county.
Talk a little bit about the regulation, if there was an ordinance that allowed for the cultivation, a little bit about the regulation, the permit process, how you would envision that working.
Right. So as I said before, we would limit it to 1 acre per legal parcel. You'd have to apply to the county for probably an administrative permit to be able to plant it, just to make sure that you're meeting the setbacks and not removing any trees. You'd have to apply for a state cultivation license, which is very rigorous and has all kinds of security and environmental regulations in it. There's no reason for the county to duplicate that. You just simply say you must follow all state laws, which require security cameras and motion detectors and infrared detectors on the site to make sure that nobody is there stealing and kids can't get in. The Fish and Wildlife Department has all kinds of regulations on making sure we're protecting fish, and then the State Water Board protects the waterways, as well as there's the pesticide protection, that you can't have any pesticide use or you can't sell the product legally. So the state rules cover all of those things that most people are concerned about. We certainly are looking forward to technology being developed that does a better job of detecting if somebody is too inebriated to drive. It's a little harder with cannabis than alcohol because it stays in your system for a long time. But we support that, and we're, as Stephanie said earlier, we're going to support both through our association, and hopefully the county will devote the tax money that we pay in sales tax and excise tax under cannabis to youth education to keep youth away from cannabis.
Yeah, we strongly believe that people under 21 or 22 years old should not be using cannabis. So we will do everything we can to pass that on and work with school districts and educate.
What's more critical to your effort, the cultivation or the dispensaries?
For the association right now, it's the cultivation. We think that that there should be cultivation here, that we should be able to put Napa on the name and sell it other places. But dispensaries are the next closest thing. We want to see dispensaries in all the cities, and we are working on that effort in each city.
Do you want to see dispensaries in the unincorporated county?
No, we don't think that's appropriate. We think that the ag preserve is a great design, and retail should be in the cities, and ag should be in the preserve.
All right. Well, if people want more information, where can they go online? What can they do to see these results of the survey? Or
they can go to our website, NAPACannabisassociation.com, and they can certainly call Stephanie or I or email us, and the information's on there.
Eric Sklar, Stephanie Honig, thanks so much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff.
Thanks for listening to NAPAbroadcasting.com. Napa Valley Radio, for the way we live now.